Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 9th, 2022 at 3 o'clock p.m. And that means it's time for Women and Business. Now, attribution where attribution is due. I have to admit that I stole today's idea for a show from Nicky Adamkiewicz, who did a live on Monday talking about this same subject. And I think her discussion was a little more prompted by the fact that it's very tiring to try to help people who consistently give you excuses for why they can't do what you're telling them to do, which I have experienced that too, and fully support everything she said in her live and agree with it. So this today is really more, okay, let's talk about how to stop making excuses and maybe a little bit about why we do make excuses and see if we can change that trend a little bit. If you're getting distracted by my hair, don't feel bad. I am too. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, you can't see my hair, obviously. You can see the video version on YouTube. But yeah, short. Anyway, not what we're here to talk about. What we are here to talk about is making excuses and how to stop doing that, because excuses just get in the way of getting things done, and they get in the way of achieving what you want to achieve. So you need to stop making excuses if that's what you're doing. And I have some ways that I want to talk about where you can find insight or maybe get the ability to stop making excuses if that's what you have been doing. And the first one that I want to talk about is, if you want to stop making excuses, take responsibility. This is a big thing. If you've ever heard any of Aaron's Small Business Saturday courses that he did like a 10-week series, and take responsibility was one of the things he talked about there. But it's a huge thing, especially if you're prone to making excuses. And the reason why it matters so much is, if you take responsibility for something, you are saying, I can affect this. I can change this. I can impact this. I have the ability to make this. Sorry, I need to adjust myself a little bit here. I have the ability to make this different, this situation, this event, this thing I do want to do or don't want to do. I have the ability to impact this. And if you take responsibility in and of yourself, you are also removing responsibility from other people, which one of the things that a lot of people do when they make excuses is they kind of put control in other people's hands. My husband won't let me. My parents never taught me. My teachers told me I couldn't do it, whatever it is. So when you take responsibility for it, you say, okay, my teacher told me that I couldn't do it. I'm going to go on Google and Google 5 ways to do it and see if any of them will work for me. Or I don't have the money to take this class that I want to take to learn how to do this thing. So I'm going to contact the instructor and see if maybe she'd be willing to take a payment plan. Or I'm going to see if there's a way that I can trade or barter something to be a part of this class. Or I'm going to Google and see if there's a way to learn part of what I need to learn another way for a lesser cost, whatever it can be. And if you're taking responsibility for making things happen, if you're taking charge of your own life, then you are essentially saying, I have the ability to make a difference here. And that makes a huge, I hate to say difference twice in two sentences, but it does make a huge difference in your life. If you say, I have the responsibility for how my life goes, and I have the responsibility for what happens in my life, and I have the responsibility for making what I want happen in my life, then you're in a very different playing field than if you're constantly saying, I can't I can't do this because I don't have the money. I can't do this because XYZ person won't let me. I can't do this because the man is holding me down, whatever it is. And yes, there is systemic oppression. There are family issues. There are money issues. There is all that stuff. And I'm not negating any of that. I'm just saying there's an acknowledgement of the situation and an attempt to try to figure out a way to alleviate whatever the barrier is. And then there's just saying, well, there's a barrier and there's nothing I can do. Oh, well, I'm helpless. And honestly, none of us are really ever helpless. It may feel that way, but we're not. So you need to be aware of that, and you need to be willing to accept that. And honestly, being aware of it is sometimes fairly easy. It's accepting it that's harder. There is a certain seductiveness to being helpless, because if you're helpless, if everything is not your responsibility, then you can't do anything. You're just basically a stick in the current, and the current takes you wherever you need to go. So it's just a matter of saying, I have agency in my life. And the other half of this too, and this is something that is sometimes even harder for people, is taking responsibility means also acknowledging that there are things you don't want to do. And not hiding behind, I can't, I'm busy, or I can't, there's this, or I can't, I have to do this thing, and just saying, you know what, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to this thing. I don't want to speak on this panel. I don't want to be on this show. You know, you have the right to say, I don't care to. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I don't care to do it, for whatever the reason. And there is, I've put it up, I think, on Facebook a couple of times, and it's a very succinct little sentence, which is, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to feel bad for saying it. You can just say no. You can say, no, I don't want to. And honestly, saying no, I don't want to, instead of making 14 excuses for why you can't, is a very powerful thing, because it's, again, giving you agency in your life. I don't want to. This is not something that appeals to me. I don't want to go to this thing. I don't want to do this. And you know what? People are going to tell you, I tend to be, and I know this is going to sound weird to some of you, but I tend to be fairly introverted. People wear me out. I'm very empathetic, and I tend to be a caretaker for people. And so when I get into groups of people or around a lot of people, I'm very other focused, and I spend a lot of energy. And I have learned over time that in order to do that successfully, there has to be alone time on both sides of that. And that sometimes, honestly, the expenditure is just not worth it. And sometimes someone will invite me to something, and I will just say, you know what? I really don't want to do that. No excuses. I just don't want to do it. I don't like going to that place. I don't like being in that thing. I don't necessarily like being with these people. I don't want to do that. And does it go over huge? Not always. Sometimes not ever. But I'm being true to my needs, and I'm taking care of myself, and I'm taking responsibility for taking care of myself. And that is important. So, and good afternoon, Cindy. Thank you for being here. Certainly my most faithful watcher. And Tanya, hi, Christine. Becky says hi as well. Hi, Becky. Hi, Tanya. Thank you both for being here. So taking responsibility, I think, is the first pillar of stopping making excuses. It's taking responsibility for what you want, taking responsibility for making sure that you get what you need, taking responsibility for figuring out ways around obstacles if they occur in your path, taking responsibility for the fact that your life is yours and you have agency in it, instead of handing your responsibility to everybody else. Because honestly, in the end, whatever happened to you in your relationships, in your childhood, when you went to school, whatever it was, whoever was mean to you, whoever, said nasty things, whoever abused you, whatever it was, they've moved on. If you're still clinging to whatever happened as an excuse for why you can't be happy now, then you're not doing them any damage. The only person that you're damaging is yourself. So think about that. The next thing, and this is a really toxic thing that a lot of people do, is they make comparisons, and you need to stop doing this. You need to stop making comparisons. And I'll give you an example of this because this is one that happened to me that I now regret a lot. When I was late elementary school, junior high age, so maybe like 11 through 15 or 16, I had this friend. And my friend was a child prodigy. She was friggin' brilliant. She could play the piano and the violin like no one I have ever heard in my life. She's now teaching at a conservatory in Ohio. She's just amazing. But I played piano and violin too. But I was the pedestrian sort of pianist and violinist. I wasn't great. I was decent. I was okay. I had musical talent. I was okay, but it wasn't great. And I would look at this young woman who was my friend, who was just, I could sit and listen to her play for hours. She was amazing. And she mastered enormously hard, terribly difficult pieces. And she played them beautifully. And she did concerts and she was amazing. And all I could see was, I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to be her. So instead of realizing that I didn't have to be her, I kept comparing my ability to hers. And of course, because she was a prodigy, I came up second best all the time. Now, did that really matter? Did I want to make music a career? If I was ever going to make music a career, it would have been singing, and singing was where I excelled. But I liked playing the piano. I liked playing the violin, but gradually I stopped doing it because I wasn't ever going to be a prodigy. I wasn't ever going to be super amazing. So I lost out on these things that I really loved because I couldn't be the person that my friend was. I couldn't be the kind of musician that my friend was. And I look back on that now and I'm a little sad because my reasoning behind why I stopped was never, I can't be Holly. My reasoning was, well, I don't have time. I'm busy. It costs money. There are other things I could do. I should concentrate on my singing. I should blah, 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 blah. 50 million reasons why I needed to drop out of orchestra and I needed to stop taking piano lessons and whatever. So these days, I probably could play a little piano, maybe. I don't know. I haven't tried in a long time. But I think that would come back fairly easily. I would have absolutely no ability left to play the violin at all. And that's sad. But I think this happens to a lot of people in a situation where maybe they're scared or they feel inadequate or their self-confidence is lacking. They look at the people around them and they say, well, how come they got that and I didn't? Or how come they got asked to do that and I didn't? Or whatever it is. And it's a really easy trap to fall into, especially if you're feeling insecure about something. I know when I started my own business, there was a little bit of time where I was looking at what other people in the industry were doing and other people that I considered my peers were doing. And I was thinking, boy, I'm not on that level. I'm not, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe this isn't going to be, my thing. And what I realized over time was that everybody gets what I don't want to say what they deserve because I don't think that's it, but part of getting recognized, part of getting asked to do things is putting yourself out there and being consistent about it. And if you're always looking at other people and saying, why are they getting things and I'm not? Maybe what you really need to be looking at is what they're doing that you're not. Are they consistently volunteering for things? Are they consistently putting new content out there? Are they consistently supporting others? Are they consistently contributing to the communities that they're in? All these things make a difference. And what happens when you make comparisons is, first of all, for the most part, you don't tend to compare yourself to people that you think are doing worse than you. You tend to compare yourself to people that you think are doing better than you. So you're always going to come out on the unbalanced end of that scale. So that's not good. And then the other thing that ends up being an issue is that if you do have self-esteem issues, if you do have low self-confidence, if you are feeling uncertain, it just kind of reinforces all the negative things that you're already thinking. So that's comparisons just never. Ooh. Well, hello, Faye from Australia. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it very much. So stop comparing, because there's no percentage to it. There's nowhere where comparisons are probably going to make you feel better about yourself. And honestly, if you are comparing yourself to people that you think you're better than, that's really just a form of insecurity, and it's really not good for you either. If you have to put other people down or even think negative things in your head about other people to feel better about yourself, then you need to visit your self-esteem and how you're managing your self-esteem, because you shouldn't have to put other people down to feel better about yourself. But in terms of excuses, the excuses that come with making comparisons are things like, well, I'm not as good as they are, or I don't have the connections that they do, or I'm not as talented, or I'm not as smart, or whatever it is, or I didn't have the advantages that they had, so that therefore I can't do the stuff that they do. So just don't. I mean, we joke that people are snowflakes, that everyone is unique, and we use it as kind of a derogatory term, that they're fragile and delicate. But I kind of like the idea of people as snowflakes, because snowflakes are unique. Everyone is slightly different, and everyone has its own thing to contribute to the overall snowfall. And people are like that. We're all different. We all have unique talents and unique abilities and unique experiences and unique perspectives. And so comparing ourselves to others is just really kind of a damaging thing to do, because honestly, there's always going to be somebody that's worse than you, and there's always going to be somebody that's better than you. There's always going to be somebody that's prettier, thinner, younger, smarter, richer, whatever the is that you want. There's always going to be someone to whom you can compare yourself and come out less. And that doesn't get anybody anywhere. And that's one of the things I think that was the most empowering for me to learn, was the idea that, you know what? I'm a unique person. I have a unique perspective. I have a unique ability to do whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And I'm going to do it in a slightly different way than everybody else. Now, is that way worse or better? Depends. Some people are going to like it. Some people aren't. That's kind of how it goes. But I try these days, and I don't always succeed because I'm human, but I try not to compare myself to other people. I don't always remember that that's something I don't want to do, but I try. The next thing, and this is one that I was the queen of when I was younger. If you had met me in my late teens, but late tweens actually probably, but late teens or early 20s, I would have told you that the reason that my life was shit was my parents' fault. Completely. Everything. Every bit of it. Or my teachers, or, the guy who abused me, or whoever it was, but it was everybody else's fault and not mine. And it's a very seductive thing, because if people hurt you, if people abused you, if people caused you pain, it feels good in a sense to say, this is you. You did this. Look at the damage you did. There's a couple of things wrong with this, though. Number one, the people who hurt you 99 times out of 100 don't care. They've moved on. The damage that they did to you, whatever it was, probably isn't on their mind. They may not even be thinking about you. So you spending time going, look what you did to me, doesn't have any impact on them. It just keeps you in the pain that you're trying to get someone to acknowledge. The other half of this is sometimes people do damage unintentionally. Parents are huge in this area. You know, they're dealing with their own problems, they're dealing with their own stuff, and sometimes in the process of trying to deal with their stuff, or not, as the case may be, they do damage to their kids. They don't mean to. It just happens. So again, you can spend all your time going, well, because my mom told me I was fat, I now can't play sports, or I can't wear short sleeve shirts, or whatever it is. But you know what? At some point, you have to just go, it doesn't matter what anybody else did. Or because my husband was abusive, I can never, ever have a relationship again. Now, I get this one because I dated a lot of not so great guys when I was younger. And, you know, you get gun shy and you get scared. But there's help for these kind of things. If you've had a bad relationship, if you have trauma from your childhood, if you were abused, whatever that event was, or events, or series of events, whatever, that, you know, caused you pain or maybe created some damage, there are people who can help you with that. There are therapists, there are groups, there's journaling, there's, you know, a number of things that you can do to try to repair some of that damage, or at least make your peace with it. But you can't do that if you're always making excuses for why you can't do things by blaming it on other people. I can't. And it's the same thing with, I can't take this class because my husband won't give me the money. I can't start a business because my husband doesn't think it's a good idea. I can't, because my parents didn't think college was for girls. I never went to college, so therefore I'm not smart enough to get a really good job, or whatever it is. There's a million things that, you know, could be potential barriers. But at the end of the day, it circles back to the only one that has responsibility for your life is you. The only one who chooses how you live that life is you. The only one who chooses what barriers or obstacles you accept is you. So, blaming others is a completely useless thing to do. And it's seductive. I get it, because that takes all the agency out of your hands. If you work for a boss that's crappy and you're not making a lot of money, and you, instead of saying, you know what, I could find a new job, you say, well, my boss doesn't pay me enough. And boy, she's really a bitch, you know. There's nothing, you can't fix that. What somebody else does, you can't fix. You can't change other people. You can't make other people be different. You can't force them to make different decisions or different choices. The only person you can impact is you, in terms of changing the course of your life. Now, that doesn't mean you can't offer to help other people. That doesn't mean you can't make a case for a raise. That doesn't mean that you can't make a case for running your relationship in a different way. All these things can happen and are true. But in the end, the only one that you can actually change is you. And trust me, because this is another thing I fell over a lot in my early 20s. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but I was the queen of dating men who had issues, and I was going to love them so much that they were going to change. And you want to know what my record was on this? 0. Never changed anyone. Went through a lot of crap trying to change people. Put up with a lot of bad treatment trying to change people. But never did change anybody. And probably still a little bit to this day, so I need to take my own advice on this one, probably ascribe the reason that I don't really pursue relationships that much to those relationships I had when I was younger. So I need to listen to my own advice here and not hold myself back. And let's see what Cindy has to say here. I think the final goal is change what you do not like about yourself. Sure, you can think, I wish I had studied harder in school, ran harder on the track, but that is the past. Move forward. And she's totally right. And again, this is where stop blaming others comes in too. A lot of the times the people you're blaming are in your past, and you're clinging to things that happened to you in your past. So don't do that. Just don't. Accept that whatever happened is what happened, but today is a new day, and look at where you want to be going forward and figure out how to get there. That's the important thing. And right on the heels of stop blaming others is let go of your damage. And by this, I mean, and I will be totally honest, I was one of the people who had this tendency when I was younger. And it's basically like Gollum with his precious. You cling to all the hurts that were done to you and all the scars, mental, physical, whatever that you have. And you mold them over and talk about them all the time. And you bring them out and show them to people like they're diamonds. And you really just have this need almost to keep reliving these events and these issues over and over and over again. I got news for you. Everybody's got damage. Everybody's got painful events in their life. Everybody's got things that hurt them. I doubt highly there's anybody in the world that couldn't point to at least one thing in their life and say, that was a really painful moment. But there's a difference between understanding that you have damage, acknowledging that you have damage, going to therapy to talk about your damage, figuring out how to deal with your damage and unlearn bad coping mechanisms and anything else that you need to do, and clinging to it. And clinging to it is usually something that people do when they're scared. You're scared of the fact that maybe you do have potential. You're scared of maybe the fact that you do have responsibility. You're scared of the fact that if you let this go, then you're not going to be treated tenderly or kindly or like you're special or important. You're scared that if you let go of your damage, you're actually going to have to become something. And that's becoming an actualized person and taking steps toward what you want is terrifying, especially if you are someone who's working to overcome damage. Because there's a lot in your head and maybe in your life that has told you that you can't do it, that you're not worth it, that you're not smart enough or pretty enough or brave enough or strong enough or whatever it is. And especially if a lot of those messages were given to you when you were a kid, it's sometimes very tough to look at that stuff and say that's wrong, because maybe it was your parents or your teachers or authority figures that were telling you these things. And that's very powerful. So I get that this is all scary, but clinging to your damage just keeps you in those situations, in those scenarios. Clinging to your damage is an excuse. Yeah, it's a great excuse for a lot of things. I can't do this because I'm scared. I can't do this because I'm hurt. I can't do this because my self-esteem is so low because my parents trashed me when I was a kid or whatever it is. You know, it is a built-in excuse. That's really what it is. And honestly, doing the work can be hard, and doing the work can be painful. Going to therapy, acknowledging that you screwed up, making amends for the screw-ups that you did. accepting that you did a lot of things that weren't so great too. So maybe the monsters in your closet were partly you. That's all hard. That's painful. That's scary. But it's necessary. And if you are like Gollum, if you're sitting there just holding on to all the bits of brokenness in you and mulling over them and reliving all the instances and going on social media and sharing the time that your mom hit you, or sharing the time that you were abused, or sharing the time that your 3 best friends went out and had a party and didn't invite you, or whatever it is that caused trauma in your life, you're not solving anything. You're not fixing anything. All you're doing is keeping yourself being the person that those things happen to. I will say this. It's funny, but I just realized this recently. For years and years, I went by the name Chris until I went to college. So until I was like 18 or 19. And then I started being called Christine. I am very militant about the fact that my name is Christine, call me Christine. And I mean, to the point that I have been rude about it to certain people. And I never knew why that mattered. I knew it mattered, but I hadn't really figured out why it mattered. And then I started thinking about it one day, and I realized that to me, in my head, Chris was this person that was pretty messed up, that wasn't treated very well, that didn't have a lot of agency in her life, that was in a lot of pain. And Christine was powerful. Christine got her shit together. It took her a long time, but she did it. And Christine is a person that I'm proud of being. Chris is a person I never really liked. So that's why part of letting go of my damage was saying, this is my name now. This is who I am. I'm not saying everybody has to change their name. I'm just saying that sometimes you have to draw a line, and you have to say, excuse me, and you have to say, this is who I was and this is who I am now. And that matters. And then stick to it. Because the other thing that letting go of your damage means is sometimes letting go of people who want to keep you in your damage, or who want to damage you more, or who have damaged themselves and liked being in a group where everybody was hurting, and they don't liked being able to make excuses. So sometimes letting go of your damage means letting go of relationships, setting boundaries. All this stuff is not easy. I'm not going to lie to you. This is not like one day you wake up in the morning and go, well, things are going to be different now, and then everything magically clears up. It doesn't always happen that way. But, sorry, needed a little water there. But letting go of your damage is very powerful. And I want to see, we have a couple. Like the phrase from a movie, baby steps. Yep, that's very true. I like that, Cindy. So letting go of your damage, I think, is really important. And the more time that you spend mulling over it and going over it and talking about it and explaining how you were hurt and why you were hurt and who hurt you and how much they suck, you're just keeping yourself in that situation and in that scenario. And you're just hurting yourself again. So stop doing it. Seriously, let it go. Do what you have to do, get the help you need to get, and move on, because you're not getting anywhere if you're just clutching it to your chest and hurting yourself all over again. And the next thing, if you want to stop making excuses, is knowing the difference between good fear and bad fear. And when people talk about fear, they'll give you the acronym false expectations appearing real, or whatever it is. And a lot of people don't talk about the fact that there's good fear and there's bad fear. They say you should be fearless all the time. And that's sort of true. But there are times when being scared of something is good. If I had listened to the fear that I had about the man that abused me, it probably wouldn't have happened, because I knew something was going to happen and I knew it was something that I didn't want to happen, but I didn't listen to that part of my instincts. So there is good fear, and good fear is the fear that gets you out of situations that are potentially dangerous and can hurt you. And that's the fear you need to listen to. If you're walking up to somebody's house and there's a huge dog in the yard that's growling and snarling and drooling, and you're scared of it, you're probably right. And you maybe shouldn't go into the yard. And that's good fear. That's fear that's doing what it's supposed to do, which is keeping you safe and keeping you away from things that could hurt you. Now, bad fear is fear that really isn't necessarily fear. It's uncertainty, or it's lack of self-confidence, or it's lack of self-esteem, or it's, unpreparedness, any number of things where you say you're scared because it feels like fear. Or it's something that you don't know that you can, if you can do it, or it's something that you're pretty sure you can't do it. So instead of saying, I'm scared I can't do it, just say no, because you can't walk through the scaredness to get to the other side. And honestly, with bad fear, that's what you have to do. You have to acknowledge that this makes me nervous. You have to acknowledge that this particular thing is not comfortable for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. When I started this, we've talked about this before too, but when I started this show, I hate being on camera. I spent 10 minutes before this show started today looking at my hair and going, oh my God, what the hell? I look like an egg with hair. It's just not, or an egg that's, going moldy or something. That was what was going through my head. I don't like the way I look. I've never liked the way I look. I have gotten through that fear because the benefits of doing this show and the benefits of doing seminars and talking in front of people are huge for me. And honestly, when I get over the bit of you look like an egg with hair, or, whatever the thing is that I'm feeling that day, I love it. I wouldn't have done 70, I think it's 73 of these shows now, if there wasn't something about it that fed me, that was amazing. But I never would have gotten to do 73 of these shows if I hadn't done the first one. If I hadn't done that first seminar years and years and years ago when Scott Ritter asked me to do it. And honestly, had there not been a podium in that room, I probably would have done the seminar sitting on my butt on the floor because my legs were not going to hold me up. But I did it. And I still do it. And does it still scare me? I don't know if fear is the word anymore. There's still some dislike of certain things. I'm never going to like how I look. That's just how it is. I've come to just believe that what I'm saying is more important than the image that's on the screen, or I tell myself that. I hope I'm right about that. But we need to look at fear in a couple of ways. There is good fear. Good fear is fear that keeps you from getting hurt, that keeps you from going into the relationship with the guy that seems overly controlling, that, keeps you from walking into the yard with the dog that looks like he wants to eat your toes. That's good fear. That's positive fear that keeps you from driving over the bridge when there's a flood. That's good fear. That's fear that's going to keep you safe. And then there's bad fear, which is the fear that is just stopping you from doing things that could potentially be really beneficial. Starting a business. Fear of failure is a bad fear. You know what? We're all going to fail at some point. We're all going to mess up. We're all going to hurt somebody. We're all going to screw up. We're all going to lose money. We're all going to ruin a blank. We're all going to make an idiot of ourselves in some way. It's just, that's human nature. That's life. So make friends with failure. Don't worry about failing. Don't worry about looking like an idiot, and accept that fear of being disliked is another fear. You know what? Not everybody's going to like you. You're not for everybody. And if they don't, they don't. They don't have to. That's okay. But because we're so afraid of being disliked, of saying something, of doing something that makes people not like us, we don't speak up. We don't talk about the things that matter to us. We don't act on our nerdy obsessions that we love. We try to be something other than what we are because we think what we are isn't acceptable. And that's bad fear. Fear that keeps you from being your authentic self, that's bad fear. So don't do that. So I'm laughing at Cindy's comments here. She's been putting some good ones up. Like you said, you have to decide to start fresh, like a snake shedding its skin and starting with a fresh body. Turn and start a new you. And yes, she's totally right. Common sense, it is there for a reason, to protect you. Common sense is really another name for good fear. So I think we need to differentiate between good fear and bad fear. And we need to understand why bad fear is something we need to get rid of, and good fear is something that we need to listen to when it happens to us. Because we kind of lump every kind of fear in one little bundle and we say we should just dispense with all of it. But you know what? I'm sorry, I'm probably never going to paraglide off a cliff. To me, that's a good fear because I don't trust it. And, plummeting to the ground is not something that I really want to do. Now, is that going to materially impact my life in any way? Probably not. Some people will be all for paragliding off a cliff, other people won't, and that's fine. And for me, that's a good fear because honestly, my heart ain't so great after all. Let's not have a heart attack in midair. But the bad fears are the ones that keep us from potentially doing things that could benefit us, from starting a business, from, trying to put designs on a new set of blanks or creating a new line of products, from writing a book, from teaching a seminar, from going on a show like this, all those things. And that's why we need to be aware that there is good fear and there is bad fear. And good fear you should embrace because it is keeping you safe. Bad fear you need to walk through sometimes. And you need to be able to tell the difference because that's important. Next way to stop making excuses is know why. Not why you're making excuses, but why do you want to do this thing? Whatever the thing is that you're making excuses. When I was younger, and most of my stories start this way, but I'm a late bloomer. Come on, give me a break. So when I was younger, I weighed a lot more than I do now. And I understand I am not svelte by any means now, but I weighed quite a bit more when I was younger. And I had every excuse under the sun for why I couldn't lose weight. I didn't like diets. My parents had traumatized me. They had put me on, really strict diets when I was a kid. We did the Bataan Death March, forced exercise. I was told that I was unacceptable, that I wasn't pretty, blah, blah, blah. So for a long time, I was just like, you know what? It is what it is. And then about 2008, my heart went wacky in a new and not so fun way. And I started realizing that, okay, there were things I could do to impact what that meant in my life. I could be healthier or I could be not healthy. I could be hospitalized a lot or I could not. And part of the way to not was to eat better, was to lose weight, was to exercise regularly. And so slowly, and it was a slow process, but slowly I started learning how to navigate that in a way that worked for me. And I found the why of my weight loss, which was it helps me manage chronic health conditions better. if I do these things, if I exercise, if I pay attention to my diet, if I make more sensible choices when I eat, if I watch my portions, then I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to be around longer. I'm going to have better heart function. I'm going to be hospitalized less. Do I love any of it? Actually, sort of some of it now. I like exercise a lot better than I used to. But the key was knowing why I was doing it. And then once I understood that, the excuses kind of went away. Now, when I'm sore from exercising and the next day comes around and I need to exercise again, I don't say, oh, I'm sore, I'll just take today off. And then today turns into 2 days and 3 days and 10 days or whatever. Now I say, oh, I'm really sore. Well, gee, maybe I'll do yoga today. Or I wonder if I could do a mobility routine. Or maybe I worked my legs yesterday, so today I'll do arms or whatever it is. And you find a way to make it work because my why is different. If you want to start a business, if you want to go back to school, if you want to be in a relationship, if you want to start giving seminars, if you want to do a show like this one, whatever it is, figure out why it is you want to do that. What is the benefit? What are you going to get out of it? And it's really honestly, what are you going to get out of it? Because I will tell people when they ask me, why did you start the show? What was the purpose of this? I'll say, well, I wanted to put good out in the world. And I frame it as I wanted to help other people. And that's totally not a lie. That is one of the reasons that I did this show. But if honestly, the why for this show was I had a lot of stuff to say and I wanted a place to say it. And I was willing to walk through the fact that I don't always like how I look on camera. And I was scared that nobody was going to pay attention. And I was scared that I wouldn't have anything to say. And I was scared that I wouldn't be able to find any guests because I thought it was important, because I saw a place that I thought was being underserved. And I thought I could be the one to serve it. And I had things I wanted to say. So that's the why behind this particular thing. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you're unhappy in your life, if you're unhappy about something in your life and you're trying to change it and you keep coming up with excuses, come up with your why for why you want to change it. What do you think you'll get if you make things different, if you do things differently? What do you think will happen? What do you think the benefit will be? If you know that, then it makes it a little bit easier to do whatever it is you need to do to make the change. So know your why. And again, this is an Aaron Montgomery thing he says all the time. If you're in our success group, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. Or if you listen to Two Regular Guys, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. But it is a true thing. Know why. What does it mean to you? What's the value of it? What will you get from it? Because once you understand that, it gets a lot easier to stop making excuses, because you can see the brass ring. You can see the golden ticket. You can see the thing you're going to get on the other side. And that makes it worth doing the work, and that makes it worth walking through the fear, and that makes it worth living with the parts that maybe aren't so much fun. So know your why. The next step in stopping making excuses is be realistic. And by this, I mean, and I'll admit, I am the queen of this. I don't tend to think small. I don't tend to think I'll start a small business. I don't tend to think I'll start a small group. I don't tend to think we'll have a small trade show. I tend to think world domination. And I don't know why that is. I have always been that way. Even when I wasn't very confident in myself, I always kind of had big ideas. Of course, back then I was very much, well, that's never going to happen. Now I'm like, okay, I have a plan. Let's go. Which is much more fun. But be realistic about what you think the outcome is going to be. Be realistic about how you think things will go. I mean, let's take this for instance. A lot of people who want to start a small business say, I'm going to start a small business and I'm going to take every Friday off and I'm going to have all my weekends free and I'm going to take 3 weeks of vacation and I'm going to make all this money and blah, blah, blah. And they haven't really talked to anybody who's ever owned a small business. And they haven't really done any research or had any kind of input into what actually running and owning a small business means. And so they have this very unrealistic picture. And usually the people who say this are people who are working for someone in a job they don't really care for, or maybe their boss isn't really great. And so they kind of have this pie in the sky idea of what it would be like if they were on their own. Now, there are great things about having your own business. There are terrific things, but there are also some not so great things. And you need to be realistic about what you expect to have happen. Same thing with losing weight. Same thing with getting in a relationship. Same thing with almost anything you choose to do. You know, I know people who are single and they say, oh, I want to meet the perfect man or the perfect woman or whatever. I want to meet the perfect partner and it's going to be just lollipops and roses and so romantic and everything's going to be great. And it's like, I'm sorry, there's no relationship in the world that is 100% wonderful all the time. There's going to be the day when they don't remember to take out the trash. There's going to be the day when they get sick and they're whiny about it. There's going to be the day when you fight about money. There's going to be the day when they eat your ice cream that you were looking forward to. Whatever it is, there's going to be a day where these things happen. So you need to be realistic about what you're expecting and what you think is going to happen. And you need to accept that not everything is going to be easy and not everything is going to be sunny. That sometimes it's going to be hard and sometimes it's going to be scary and sometimes it's going to be difficult. It's going to be conflicting. It's going to be annoying. Whatever adjective you want to use, it's going to be all of those things. But if you're realistic and if you've done your homework and if you understand what it is that you're getting into, then it's a lot easier to stop making excuses for why things aren't working because you know that you're going to encounter these issues. So there's a lot of, I think sometimes it's almost easier to have this really unrealistic vision to get you started because you want to kind of bask in the glory of what could be because that gets you off the starting block. But you need to have a realistic goal. You need to have a realistic picture. If you're starting a business, your goal can't be, I want to make $5 million my first year. I mean, it can be, but that's generally not realistic for most people. So if you make $2 million, are you then a failure if you don't get to 5? So you need to understand the parameters of whatever it is you're doing and be realistic about the outcomes that are possible. And the last thing, which we touched on earlier, but if you want to stop making excuses, you need to stop trying to change others. And you need to stop making excuses for other people, too. This is one of the most valuable things if you've grown up with an alcoholic in your family, or an alcoholic partner or whatever. One of the things that they teach in Al-Anon and Alateen and AA for that matter is that you have to stop making excuses for the person who is in the midst of their addiction. You have to stop making it easier for them. You have to stop justifying why they're doing what they're doing. You have to stop picking up for them. You have to stop covering for them. You have to let them be in the throes of their addiction and you live your life over here and try to let their addiction impact you as little as possible. That ain't easy. It isn't easy at all. But it's much easier than trying to make someone who's in the midst of an addiction stop their addiction. They're not going to do it. And the caveat to changing others is also you need to stop trying to change yourself to be what you think someone else wants you to be. And this is also another thing that if you've ever been in Al-Anon or Alateen, they'll talk about is that one of the things that happens in an alcoholic household is that people get told that their behavior is causing this other person to drink. So if you were a better daughter, if you were a better wife, if you were a better partner, whatever it is, this would not happen. Now that's complete crap because it's an addiction. But you have to stop trying to change yourself to make other people do something differently. And you need to stop trying to change others to make them behave towards you in a way that you want them to. This isn't easy because it's a pervasive theory in our culture that you can make other people change by doing things a certain way, or you can make other people change by changing to suit them better. Doesn't work that way. People, the only person that you can change is you. And the only reason that you should change you is if you're unhappy, if you're not accomplishing what you want to accomplish, if you feel like you could do more in your life, then you should change you. You should do the work to get to where you need to be. But ultimately, changing others is a losing proposition. You're never going to be able to do it. And probably the only thing that's going to happen is a lot of pain and misery. And you're probably going to hear a lot of excuses, and you're probably going to make a lot of excuses. So don't do it. I especially will say this to anyone who is in a relationship or contemplating a relationship. The person that you are contemplating being in a relationship with is who they are. Do not go into the relationship thinking that you will love them enough to make them different. You won't. And I speak from experience on that one. So ultimately, you're responsible for you, and you're responsible for making the best life you can make. And the best way to do that is to figure out who you are, figure out your strengths and weaknesses, and be true to those and accept them for what they are, and love the bits of yourself that maybe you think aren't that lovable, which isn't always easy. I get that. But ultimately, it's going to take you a lot further than clinging to your damage and making excuses. And that is my little lecture for today, y'all. So I will say next week there is a guest. I'm very excited. Jenna Caranta will be here. It's going to be a great discussion. She recently did the Baddest Women of Promo podcast with Charity Gibson, if you want to learn something about her before you come see her here. But it's going to be a great talk. I hope you will all come and join me. Thank you for listening to me today. Thank you, Nicky Adamkiewicz, for the idea. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all next week as soon as I hit